96.3 and 103.7. This is Talk of the Town.
We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating.
Here's Henry Hinton.
All right, it's 8:30. Welcome back. Talk of the Town here on Tuesday morning, January 24th. The General Assembly is back in Raleigh tomorrow, and the long session for 2023 will begin. I've got one of my favorite members of the legislature on the phone right now, Representative Jason Saine, who is one of the most powerful men in the North Carolina legislature. He's from Lincolnton, North Carolina, and he joins us now by phone. Good morning, Representative Saine. How are you?
Good morning, Henry, and I'm glad to hear I'm still one of your favorites after I stood you up last time.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring it up. You stood me up at the legislature. That's fine, but that's why we got you on this morning. That's all right. Hey, here's my first question, and I really want an honest answer. Now, will you promise to give me an honest answer to this question?
I have a problem, and I only give honest answers. So, as my dad says, don't ask me if you don't want to know.
Were you at the same party with Beth Wood?
But hell, it must have been a great party. I mean, I had to get an invitation, honestly. It must have been fun, right? And I hate it for Beth because I really think the world over. But things happen. But I was not at that party. I did not get that invite.
Good for you. I love Beth too. She's really one of my favorite. And somebody brought it up yesterday and said, well, the Republican Party is asking for Beth to resign. So the Republicans are really going to come after her. I said, look, you need to understand something. Republicans in the General Assembly and all of us, we love Beth Wood. Beth may be a Democrat in name, but she is bipartisan when it comes to going after things and things that aren't right. So she's done some great work for people around the state for many years. I hope that turns out well for her. I hate that she's in that pickle, but she's in it. All right, let's talk about tomorrow's session. You guys will be back for the General Assembly tomorrow. And, of course, the hot topic that I know everybody is interested in with regard to your work is sports gaming. You had the sports gaming bill up in the House in the last session, and I don't want to use the word double cross, but you had some folks that told you they were going to vote for it, didn't show up for the vote. So, where is sports gaming now? The Senate passed it. We asked Senator Berger about it the other day. He said, we're not doing anything with it until the House does it. So it's in your court, right? Where do we stand with sports gaming?
It is, and I like to think the last session is we broke even because we had a bill that passed by a vote. An hour later, we had one that lost by a vote. And so, therefore, it didn't get sports betting. So, to borrow a betting term, we broke even.
Yeah.
So here's a couple differences this year. One, it's not new to the legislature. A lot of times things come to the legislature. It takes a little time to marinate. Change doesn't happen overnight. I also think that legislators have seen another year go by where, our dollars, our citizens' dollars have gone somewhere, but it hasn't been to this state. It's been to Virginia and other places. And to offshore accounts and things of that nature when they sports bet. I've only actually placed a sports bet truly one time in my life, and I just happened to be at the Kentucky Derby, so it kind of felt right to do it there. But I'm a proponent. I'm not a huge daily better or anything like that. But the thing that legislators have seen and learned about while we've been out of session is they've heard from constituents. I know that they have because they've told me they have. Two, they see the revenue loss, and three, I think it's just one of those things. Sometimes it takes a few retirements that can dislodge things, and we finally got it to the floor. There was a struggle to get it to the floor because they had to fight some folks who were opposed but not openly opposed, but they might have used a few legislative tricks here and there to delay the bill. So. And when we finally did get to the floor, it was middle of the summer, and we had some people out on family vacations and other things. So there's a lot going on there, but I do think that we're in a much better place going into this session. I think Senator Berger's right. I'd asked last time the Senate lead with it. We'll try it this time from the House side of things. But it's a conversation that has been ongoing, and I think that we're in a much better place today simply because we kept the conversation going. Those who are just absolutely opposed to it will remain absolutely opposed to it. And I respect that. As I told them in our caucus when I was presenting the bill, you can vote either way you want to. Just give me an honest assessment of where you're at. Didn't always get that from folks, but that's what I expect. And now that there's at least we've had a vote, and for some who were kind of teetering back and forth, we at least know a little bit more where they're at.
The General Assembly's Fiscal Research Division says that the sports betting could add up to $24 million a year additional revenues through taxing the sports bets. If it does pass, where will that money go? Is that in the bill? Is there going to be some special designation for where this money would be sent and how it would be spent?
So we don't have a bill yet, so that's being drafted. It's going to mirror a lot of what we saw last year. My preference is to keep that to the general fund. Again, politicians play tricks, and they say they're dedicating it to this thing, and then they borrow from this one and rob to the other and pay the other. So I don't think that's necessarily part of the bill yet. Last time we had money going to HBCUs into their sports athletic programs and also the local athletic programs, which I'm still open to. It's not a no. It's just that hasn't been negotiated yet. As we start to roll forward with the stakeholders and I get input and some back and forth with my colleagues to see where they're at, we'll have a little bit better idea of what needs to be in that bill. This is a legislative process. How do you get things passed? People sometimes who are on the fence see that there's an opportunity to get something for something they want, and that's part of the negotiation. People sometimes say that like it's some surprise, but that's how it works. And so I think we'll hear from those concerns. My preference is to keep it into the general fund, just simply because I think all money is fungible, and when it comes into the state, the state will decide what it's going to do, as in the legislature will decide where that money goes. But open to it, we'll see. But I do like the idea of plussing up some of our athletic programs, and really, quite frankly, for all of our universities, and even we're seeing some of our community colleges get into sports as well. I know Gaston College in my area has a great baseball team, and we've got some esports teams that are starting up. So there's opportunity. The biggest thing, though, for listeners to remember is that capturing that money and keep it in our state so that we're not funding roads in Virginia, and so that we're not funding schools in Virginia. Nice people. I wish them well, but I don't think it's the responsibility of people who pay taxes here in our state to be funding their infrastructure.
Representative Jason Saine, who represents District 97 in the North Carolina General Assembly, but also chairs the major committees, and very powerful guy in the North Carolina legislature. Not a whole lot gets passed in the House side unless Jason Saine's on board with it. So he'll have a lot to say about a lot of different things. We had Brad Crone on yesterday, and he says that we're getting ready to have a knockdown drag out on abortion. That there's what we've heard generally since the Roe v. Wade overturn is that North Carolina the leadership kind of feels like our laws are sufficient, but I guess we're going to see some bills that are going to create a lot of discussion about new abortion laws in North Carolina. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. People are very passionate about it on both sides, right? And my biggest fear, and I am pro-life, and with very few exceptions. But the reality is, you start tweaking with the law that's in place that has stood, minus Roe v. Wade. We reverted back to the 20-week ban. The problem becomes is if you pass something and then someone goes to court and challenges it again, as we saw with voter ID and other things that have come before the legislature, you run the risk of undoing the current 20-week ban. And so that's my biggest fear, is that while I might want more, pragmatically, in the case of those who are pro-life, I don't want us to undo what we already have. So those are my. I'm cautious because of that. And again, I absolutely believe in the pro-life movement. So that's pretty heavy, and it's a lot for legislators to consider. And they're getting pressure from folks who don't understand that. I get constituents sometimes who call, you got to pass a law to do X, and don't necessarily consider the consequences of doing, of actually making that action possible. So I think it's something we have to really, debate, consider, talk about. Their passions are very high about that issue. Most, if not all, of my caucus is pro-life. So with varying degrees of what we believe we should do. So it's just until we're all in the room together, until we've all had some frank discussions about it, it's really hard to predict what will happen.
Yeah.
we could keep it, it could be status quo, and that might be okay, but it may not be. It may not be enough for folks. I know the speaker has talked about a 15-week ban. So, all of these things will be considered for sure.
Of course, the other hot topic that we have talked a lot about is whether or not this is going to be the year we actually see some movement and something passed on Medicaid expansion. I know the North Carolina Hospital Association is lobbying hard for that, and the Senate passed it in the last session. Phil Berger admitted on our show 2 weeks ago that he's come a full 180 on Medicaid expansion. But, I get mixed signals out of the House. I don't. Some folks I talk to think that you're going to get something done on it this year, and other people tell me that the votes just aren't there. Can you predict where this is going with Medicaid expansion?
I don't know that I can make an accurate prediction. I can give you kind of my thoughts on it. I come from a very conservative district, so I don't have people in my district calling me begging me to expand Medicaid, and the few that have are never voting for me. So kind of take that into consideration when they call. But the reality is that the math has changed somewhat in terms of the Republicans that we've gained seats with. You go from red districts like mine, very conservative districts like mine, to those that are kind of purplish in the suburbs of folks who are voting for the Republican, but they might have a little different take on Medicaid expansion. So, I think it kind of boils down to that middle that's out there of where they want to go with Medicaid expansion. Obviously, the Democrats have been for it; they want it. I can hear, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, we've added to our numbers and taken away from theirs. So it's really going to play out, I think, in that vast middle in the House of where those folks end up, and where after some talk and debate and discussion, particularly with the new folks, of where they end up and how what happens with Medicaid expansion. There's some plus sides to go ahead and moving forward. One, it's finally take it off the table. Like anything else, you get a little weary of just talking about things over and over again, and we've certainly talked about it over the last several sessions. And there's an influx of money, but for the same reason that there's the influx of money, it's like anything else you deal with the federal government. It's like handling snakes. It's not always what it seems to be, and it's not always perfect. It's rarely perfect, and so it does come with some consequences. And I think some of the consequences that have been expressed in my caucus is you're taking away people's motivation to go to work. We already have a worker shortage problem. We're basically allowing people who are somewhat that could go to work, maybe incentivizing the opportunity not to go to work. So those are things that are going to be talked about, and so where that ends up, I don't know where that ends up in our caucus. I mean, passions are very high on both sides of it. I've not had a real motivation. I'm always pragmatic. I always will entertain a conversation with anyone, but like I told you with my district, that's the reality. No one in my district is even coming close to compelling me to vote for Medicaid expansion. So while those that have a self-interest in it are, nobody at home.
Well, I've been a little ambivalent. I'm as conservative as they come, but I've been a little ambivalent about it until recently. I've had conversations with hospitals here in eastern North Carolina, and I mean, we're really struggling over here. I just noticed this morning an article that United Health just announced a profit of $4.9 billion in fourth quarter. They had $20.6 billion in profits this year, and hospitals are losing money. So I don't, the healthcare thing is broken in many ways, and I don't know if Medicaid expansion is the answer. But I do know we're sending money to other states while we've got hospitals here in eastern North Carolina that are really hemorrhaging right now. So I would encourage, I would encourage you to take a look and maybe talk to some of our folks in the East, because I'm beginning to believe that if without Medicaid expansion over here, that some of our hospitals are going to be in real financial trouble, and sooner or later, they're going to have to get bailed out by the taxpayers one way or the other, because we got to have hospitals. So
well, that's right, and that's the real crux of all this, right? Is that we're trying to apply. I mean, we think in free market ways, right? How do you fix it? Healthcare is anything but a free market. There's nothing about it that you've got government intervention and involvement at all levels in healthcare, and we wonder why it's broke. I mean, what does government really run well ever? So rural folks need healthcare. They need access to healthcare. They need the opportunity, where they don't have to drive 3 and 4 hours just to see a specialist and a physician that can work with them with their whatever their issue is. So it is lots of balls being juggled in the air. I don't think Medicaid expansion solves much. I think it's a short-term fix, but then it levels off again, as everything does in healthcare, and then we find the new healthcare problem in some years right after that. So we talking about healthcare, we band-aid it, we never fix it, and that's from federal government to the state level as well.
Well, Obamacare was supposed to solve all this, right? And all it did was create more problems.
Right. Big government solutions don't work, and that's really the problem. I mean, so while this may be a short-term fix, I really don't think that this is a long-term fix. But I can't fix it. I'm one of 170, so. It's really going to take a lot more than that to really repair our healthcare system problem.
Well, I hope that if we can get the other problem with it, of course, is all the fraud that's been thrown into healthcare, particularly Medicaid, Medicare over the years. My mom just passed away and just had a 19-day hospital stay, and I'll tell you, man, dealing with Medicare, dealing with insurance, dealing with all that stuff. I mean, it's a nightmare these days. It's just a nightmare. Yeah. I mean, my mom was dying in the hospital, and Medicare wanted her moved out of the hospital. And I'm like, why? Thank goodness I had friends in the hospital that helped me with it. But I mean, she's not sick enough she's dying, but she's not sick enough to go here. But we got to move her somewhere else. And so it's just a nightmare. It just doesn't make any sense. And it can be cruel, to be honest with you. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that. Hey, one last thing. I saw that the leadership has now asked the new Supreme Court to rehear the voting, the voter ID bill and the redistricting bill. Now that we've got a majority conservatives on the North Carolina Supreme Court, are you optimistic that you can get those bills? That get those decisions that were made by the libs on the North Carolina Supreme Court unwound without new legislation?
I am optimistic. Judges matter. Bottom line, who we have in the judicial system is really important. I've led several initiatives in the legislature with my colleagues about making judicial races partisan. Because we know when folks know at least a party of who they're voting for, they vote a different way. I do think there's a different judicial philosophy. We're also not waiting to the last minute to make decisions like the outgoing court did, the outgoing majority. How convenient for them. Justice is sometimes on time, and sometimes it's a little late, and for them it's after they lose an election. So I think that I think there's opportunity there to at least one get a fair hearing. I think that's important. Then I think we'll adjust from that. Voter ID is one of the things that I think is crucial and important, and particularly in a society where we know that there has been irregularities, cheating in elections. It's hard to prove it when you don't look for it. But if everyone's being honest, what's the harm in making folks just a little bit more honest when they go to the polls? That if we could get some clocks sent over to Durham, it might be helpful. But so I think these things are incredibly important to look at and to review. And quite frankly, for those on the other side that don't like it, often we hear from them about judicial review and the courts looking at things and so forth, on and on and on. This is the same thing. But we'll have that looked at. We'll see what happens with that, and then we can craft our legislative strategy from that. We want elections to be fair. We want people to have one person, one vote, and to work within the system that we have. But we want people to do it in a fair way. We don't want cheating on either side. And so I think that having these things considered and looking at our redistricting case, I think is very important to voters in North Carolina.
Thank you, Jason. It's great to hear your voice. Good luck with the session. Good luck with sports gambling. We'll stay in touch with you, and I'll run by and see you one day. We're doing our show at the North Carolina Farm Show next week. I would ask you to get up and come over there and be on with us, but I know better. You're not coming to the fairground at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah, I'm more like a brunch guy. So if you're having brunch, let me know.
I'll come see you. I'll come see you after the show. How about that?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Representative Jason Saine, appreciate you being on. Great stuff. 8:51. We'll be right back.